Good afternoon, everyone. This is Beth Wadham from the Association for Contemplative Mind in Higher Education. Welcome to our February webinar, Listening to Our Eyes, Seeing as Meditation. We're here with Bradford C. Grant, Professor and Director of the School of Architecture and Design, and Associate Dean of the College of Engineering, Architecture, and Computer Sciences at Howard University in Washington, D.C. Bradford first came to the notice of the Center when he was awarded a Contemplative Practice Fellowship in 2009, and we're very fortunate that he has since become a member of the Center's Board of Directors. Bradford is a registered architect with extensive experience in urban and community design, universal design, contemplative practices in design education, and social and cultural factors in architecture. He completed his graduate degree at the University of California at Berkeley and first professional degree from California Polytechnic. Since that time, he's received awards for community design work, research on the role of African American architects, and teaching, as in this drawing as meditation. His distinguished administrative career includes being past president of the Association of Collegiate Schools of Architecture, the historic Black Colleges and Universities liaison to the board of the National Organization of Minority Architects. He's had membership in the Fetzer Institute's Advisory Council and was chairperson of the Humanities Council of the District of Columbia. Bradford is involved in research and practice of physical accessibility and health disparities in architecture and community design, and he's offered courses in interdisciplinary departments, including ethnic studies, landscape architecture, engineering, and architecture. So we're very much looking forward to hearing from you today, Bradford. I know I've heard you speak at our summer sessions before, and it's always usually some experiential qualities as well as listening to you speak. So thanks so much for being willing to share this with us. And now I'll hand over the presentation to you.
Thank you. I really appreciate everyone spending their time during this afternoon and perhaps evening, perhaps morning for some of you to take time from your day to listen to this presentation. Meditation and the process of meditation is often thought of as the closing of our eyes and not looking and erasing the sighted world. And clearly that's the appropriate way to meditate. But we also find that looking at the world with new eyes can begin the real voyage of discovery and reflection and meditation, keeping our eyes open as we meditate, if you will. And I want to explore with everyone how to use seeing and connect it to seeing drawing as a form of meditation that can help to sharpen and focus, enhance the creative process, and develop the ability to really see. Now, everyone, part of the session, and as was stated in my introduction, I usually like to have some participatory activities with my presentation. So I'm going to try to do that today. So please keep your notepads, those of you who are keeping notes and have a pencil and paper, keep your notepads and paper close by. We'll try to do this. And I'm thinking that this would be the least intimidating way because nobody will really see what you're doing or drawing or how you're doing it in drawing. And I wanted to acknowledge several people who helped me with these ideas, and here's the acknowledgement level, but I especially wanted to acknowledge Peter Vanderpoel, who is a professor here, a colleague and professor here that we taught a class together that really talked about drawing and seeing. But seeing, observing versus looking, and we often look at things, but it's very rare that we actually have the ability to see. So this idea of seeing and drawing really is a quite important concept. And becoming aware, the act of drawing is the most direct way which we can learn from the object or from nature. Acknowledgement of existence, which is one of something that really profoundly affects me. We give praise and acknowledgement to the truth of our observation, really. And Heather Williams, I think, sums it up very well. You become a channel, a midwife, a vehicle expressing things that are real but not yet fully presented until you see them. The epiphany of the commonplace. One of the things that seeing and drawing allows you to do is to focus and see the common object. A simple blade of grass becomes an epiphany of really commonplace or common materials. And certainly there's a zen to what we see and focus on and do, and becoming what you see. I mean, that object that you are seeing and drawing, you actually can become. To draw what you see, you need to feel connected to it, and you need to trust your eyes. Mindfulness is a big part of it, and imbuing dignity upon these objects. One of my quotes from Q. Lee, the pen or the pencil is the extension of the heart, and we see through the eyes, feel through the heart, and think through the brain. All of these are combined and transferred to the paper through our hands and pens. Therefore, every stroke of the pen is actually an extension of the soul, this really giving dignity. And to meditate is a really reflection and contemplation that exists with this. This is a wonderful photograph of this boy peering towards the sun. And when we look at this, and this idea of seeing is try to see the negative space. We so focus our eyes on the positive, but it's important to take a look at this negative triangular portion that is framed by the boy's arms and face, and take a look and see how that negative aspect there fills your eyes. That's true on the external or the outside of him. That negative void. What does that space really mean to us? And how do we see that negative space? And we often see this in this kind of a illusion. Some of us see a question mark first. Some of us see the stylized bird. What is the negative? What is the positive? How does that affect how we see and really think about this image and object? It also connects us to the right side of our brain, our most creative side of our brain, when we do these kinds of exercises. This is another attempt to look at this image and again see if we can look beyond the positive image of these three guys on the beach, or look to the spaces or the air between, and see what that means, and how do we focus on the areas of the spaces between as we look through here. Very, very important way to transfer and understand our senses and seeing. There's a lot of opportunities to focus and sharpen this ability to see and to see better and see with consciousness. The Washington Post Sunday's newspaper often has this little, what they call second glance, this game where you're supposed to find the differences between the top photograph and the bottom photograph, and it really requires you to take a close look and a concentrated look, and you can see that on the top photo is missing this little logo on the chest, for instance, or the chair and the two photographs have a different color to them. And there's a number of them. I believe there's 12 other differences in the images as you go around here. The banner that's hanging out is different on the top than the bottom, but it really allows you to take a focus look and sharpen the skills every week. One of the exercises that helps us with this is an exercise that really consists of looking at hands. And the hands become something that becomes very powerful as an object or an image for us to focus and our seeing, and therefore drawing of our hands. And there becomes these, and what I would like to do, and those of you who have pencils and a pad of paper, and this is an exercise that Peter Van der Poel and I and others in this educational field often will do, is do what we call a contour or an outline drawing of your hand. If you take your hand and just set it on the table and closely look at your hand and take your pen and paper and try to trace the contour or the outline of your hand. And in this case, let's just do the index finger. Just lay your hand and just take a minute, take a look at your index finger and try to trace with the pen on the paper this index finger. And at first, try not to pay a lot of attention to the pen and paper, but have your eyes focused just on your eyes tracing the outline of your finger. So try not to pay a lot of attention to what your pen and paper are doing, but keep your eyes focused, as though your eyes are tracing the edges and the outline of your finger. Move slow, relax, move comfortably. Don't worry about what the image might look like. And that's just a quick example, and we would do that with our hands. That's something that we're very comfortable and familiar with, but something that we don't take a lot of time and care to see. And this exercise really allows you to see how those kinds of abilities can play out on our own bodies, certainly our hands. And there's these 7 attitudes that Linda Berry has subscribed to as we do these kinds of seeing and drawing exercise. And that one is to be non-judging. Certainly this is not a time to be judgmental in what you're doing. Patience. Take your time, be very patient. Use this beginner's mind, seeing your hand, if you will, for the first time. Trust. Use your intuition. Trust yourself. Trust your eyes. No expectations is the non-striving. We really have no expectation. Acceptance. Just accept and see as it actually is, and letting go. Just let go and be relaxed. This is an example I wanted to show of my experience in Freedom Park in Pretoria, South Africa. And this is this very sacred and spiritual place that's embedded here in Freedom Park in South Africa. It's the burial ground for South African heroes and heroines that I was able to visit several years ago. And this became the site of my sitting down and understanding those attitudes of non-judging and patience and seeing this for the first time, my beginner's eyes, and really sketching this. And I did start out sketching by trying to sketch and draw and see the spaces in between, or the negative spaces between these boulders that represented the heroes and heroines of the South African freedom movement. Another exercise that Professor Vanderpoel and I have done is taken this really powerful poem from Lao Tzu in one of his texts, 30 Spokes, and asked students how can they represent or how can they illustrate this powerful poem of 30 Spokes, and what is the best way to evoke that. And as you can imagine, with the title, and if we had time to read this poem, many of the students wanted and decided to illustrate this with literally spokes. Many spokes, we had many examples of spokes, but this one really called out, that spoke to the really the interdimensional aspect of this poem, of this void and vessel, and the yin and the yang, and the in and the out, that this poem really spoke to, and became a really a very powerful illustration of this poem. And then lastly, at some of my examples, is a student exercise that speaks to the environment that we cross and walk around and visit every day. And what we have our students do, or what I have my students do, is walk through the environment. This happens to be a section of Howard University that the students transverse on a daily basis, but walk as though they're with a disability, as though they have to or have or are using a wheelchair. And what routes do you have to now change if you have to navigate their very familiar environment with a wheelchair? And there's some technical aspects. A wheelchair really shouldn't go up a incline or a lip more than a 1/4 inch. They should have to find the curb cuts and the ramps and various ways to negotiate themselves around the campus. But they're doing this as they're walking. And it really focused their attention on the very uncommon spaces and places that they have to step and walk around. And it focuses their attention, and it makes them mindful of the very environment that they are walking around. And this is some of the descriptions that we can see. You can evoke this idea of seeing in a meditative way, even when you're people watching. And what the exercise I would challenge you to do as you're sitting down with your cafe or a cup of coffee and watching people walk by, we all do this, but focus on one element of the person walking by. I typically will challenge you to focus on the feet. And just take that one foot and watch it as it passes by you as they're walking by. Focus on that one particular foot. And harken back to Langston Hughes, who has a series of short stories where his main character, Jesse B. Simple, speaks about how important the foot, or how you can tell so much about a person by their feet. And he has a whole dialogue about how the person's feet becomes the signpost or the signals of the person's life. But try this exercise when you're just people watching, sitting by. Just focus on the foot. Now, as I end this, I do want to put up a number of references and books that continue with this idea of focusing and seeing and looking closely at the events around us, and how we can use that as a means of clearly seeing and thus meditating. And I think I'm going to hold it there and see if there's time for questions, or if I can respond to other comments that our listeners would like to have.
Thanks so much, Brad. I think the idea of drawing as a meditation, we're so used to it being, when we look, to be exercising our more cognitive faculties and discernment, and to, I was even thinking with people watching that, keeping in mind those qualities that you talked about, being non-judgmental and patient, and all of those, it qualitatively a different kind of experience of seeing when you're doing it with that kind of intention. You can really imagine how it opens up. I can read the questions to you if you like. Yeah, should we do it that way? Okay.
Yeah, you're gonna have to read the questions.
Okay. That's no problem. Let me open up here. Okay. Here's one. In using your eyes and drawing as meditation, how do you respond to distraction? This is from Barb Bloomhoff.
You really, it's very similar to the traditional meditative position and state that we are in with our eyes closed. When our eyes are closed and we're meditating and we're breathing deeply, there are distractions. Things enter our mind as we try to empty them out. And I find similarly that will happen as you're looking. You're looking at your hand, or you're looking at as I said, the feet of someone, and there will be distractions, both visually as well as mental distraction. And you want to focus on this idea of the outline of your hand or the object that you're trying to connect with, a matter of focus. And like all practices, it is a practice. The more you do, the better you're, and the more aware you are of it. And it's about forgiving yourself. So if you are distracted, that's no problem. Just keep going, forgive yourself, and keep going at it.
Yeah. Returning to the focus. That's great. Here's another one from Brian Callahan. Brad, can you comment on your experience of seeing and the idea of connecting with the quality without a name, as mentioned in C. Alexander's work?
Yeah,
Are you familiar with that? Yeah.
Yeah, Christopher Alexander is one of my favorites, and seeing without a name, or his elements of the egoless artist within becomes an important part, especially of the design process, but certainly of this idea of seeing. And it really speaks to this idea of subjugating our egos and allowing, if you will, the ego of the object that you're focusing on, or the object that you're trying to design with, becoming the paramount part of the process that you're working with.
Thank you. And we have one from Paul Benson. He asks, what do you think the effect of gaming and focusing on screens is doing to our seeing perspective?
You know, Paul, this whole idea of, as you can see, I'm pretty much a novice with some of the technological advances that we have with gaming and screening. But I think what happens is that the screen starts to direct and frames our vision so precisely that it doesn't allow us to take control and focus. It directs us. It directs us in a way that the gaming industry or the gaming producer wants us to see and view and go, and doesn't allow our mental capacities to make choices in what we want to focus on. The other thing is that there's so much movement there. I don't know, again, all the technology of the digital screen, but there's a lot of things moving. And I think our eyes centers on that, from the pixels that are moving to the screens that are moving. And I think that destroys or distorts this idea of reflections and a kind of meditative seeing with our eyes.
Seems like it would be a wonderful counterbalance, to do this kind of meditative drawing, where you really focus in this in this way, more mindful way, to exercise that muscle so that, you know, it can manage the way that so much is limited and controlled. Here's one from, I'm a middle school teacher. This is from Allison Gehring. I'm a middle school math and science teacher. I'd like to incorporate the idea of meditation through seeing in my classroom. Any suggestions to make this applicable for my students?
Ooh, middle school is always such a very challenging grades to do, but I think it would be appropriate. Yes, I often will use what I call the wire prop as one of my objects to focus on, and it's really what do you call pipe cleaners, the little wire pipe cleaners. And to, again, have students have one of these pipe cleaners, and they can contort it and bend it in any shape that they would like to. But after they bend this pipe cleaner, or this wire, into a shape, then set it down and, again, focus on it, and just with the pen on paper, trace via their eyes this contorted wire or pipe cleaner on their paper in a slow, patient, deliberate way. And what I think will happen, especially as you talk to the students, where you examine this idea, can you be connected? Can you be this pipe cleaner? Can you be this wire? You'll find that the students, the children will really get into this idea of contorting their bodies to try to be like pipe cleaner.
And the challenge of trying to represent something like that, because I can imagine they would mangle it into a complicated shape, and then, yeah, it takes some effort. From Brenda Miller, she asks, we are being encouraged to develop more online components to our classes or to go online altogether. I'm finding the physical space of the online medium to be difficult for contemplative learning. As an architect and artist, do you have any suggestions for making online space more conducive for contemplative learning?
Brenda, that's a good question, and I think my answer would lie in the fact of just slowing down. And the online learning environment allows us, just as I was trying to do, a lot of buttons and a lot of areas where you can color and point and move and animation and all these different devices. And those become very captivating and exciting, but I think just the opposite in terms of a reflective, meditative way of teaching is to slow down and just, use the simplest means and techniques to your disposals. One photograph, one picture, one object as you talk and lecture and try to evoke some lesson plans using the online learning platform.
Just having us do that exercise of looking at our hands, I found that was really just a different kind of attention was brought. And,
right.
Yeah. Yeah. I was interested too in the experience you had at Freedom Park, in which you shared with us a photograph, and then you also shared with us the drawing that you made of that place. And I thought how our way of acquiring images with photography now, it's so instantaneous. And then your experience there, you sat and drew that park for, I don't know, how long were you drawing there, and how did that affect what you took away from the experience?
Well, my drawing, I sat there for a good half an hour just being there. And you can imagine the importance of being at Freedom Park. Those of you out there who have been to South Africa, to Pretoria, to Freedom Park, and especially for the first time, it's really a sacred place and a magical experience. So just sitting there, just being there, became really important. And after 30 minutes, I took out my sketch pad and my drawing pad and decided to use this idea of seeing between the spaces, between the rocks and the monuments, as a way of kind of meditatively seeing and drawing that space that became important. And I drew for maybe another 30 minutes, 35 minutes there. I usually don't spend a lot of time, a great amount of time when I'm drawing. I want to capture and focus on what I'm focusing on. And really it becomes a personal diary there that evokes a great amount of memory for me, much better than the photograph. So I do have the photograph. In fact, there was someone else that sent me that photograph, but it's the drawing that helps me recall and understand that moment of time.
We have a couple questions here from Sylvie Hubbard. The first is being fully involved in drawing the same as meditation? And again, I don't understand when drawing becomes meditation. So this is an interesting...
Sylvia, yeah, and really I don't think you can disconnect the two. So it starts when you are involved in this, in the seeing and the tracing and the drawing are interconnected, it's intertwined, and it is a reflective practice. It is evoking meditation. It evokes all or many of the components of meditation interconnected. It's silence, it's you're breathing slowly and deeply as you're concentrating and looking and seeing, and you're actually mindful of what you're drawing, of the object. You're connecting to the object. So it's really interconnected.
Mm-hmm. And another comment here from Peter Vanderpool, who you had mentioned. Speaking of wires, I guess with the pipe cleaners, which I do think is a great exercise for middle school. Speaking of wires, Alexander Calder, who we usually associate with mobiles, created a fabulous series of portraits using bent wire. Yeah,
Peter, I'm not familiar with that, but you see, one of my inspiration is Professor Vanderpool, that really tag teams and helps me understand better some of the things I want to do. But Calder was very much associated with wires and mobiles and movements, and I would dare say many of his mobiles and his wires are wonderful objects to really take this idea of deep seeing and meditating, and especially the negative aspects. Again, I think that's so powerful to look at his mobiles or the wires, and what makes them so free and beautiful is the air between the materials.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to add is, and I didn't want to take up much time, is this idea of perception. I mean, there's a whole theory and discussion about perception and how our mind and our bodies tend to look at things as patterns. And one of the greatest elements that in beginning drawing and beginning design is to have students draw what they see, not what they think they know and see. And because our mind works in patterns, we often start to draw what we think we know and see. And it's part of the reasons why we end up having stick figures or tree trunks that look like triangles and very other methods that are more symbols and
representations, kind of, like that.
Instead of the reality of the object.
Yeah, that is really, I think most of the time we're overwhelmed with visual experience, and there is this kind of, we have to decide what's relevant and be selective, but given the opportunity just really to open the gaze and see what's there.
And be true to the objects that we're looking at. Be very true to that, and not be true to how we think it should be.
Yeah, I remember that exercise that you did with us where you brought branches in, I think, and we had to draw the interstices between the leaf and the branch, and really not pay attention to the thing itself, but just what made it show up.
Exactly.
For us. It was wonderful.
I guess if there is an ending message, trust your eyes. Trust what you're seeing. And believe what you see, not necessarily what you think you see. Becomes the important ending.
Thank you so much, Bradford. I think that just that little taste that you gave us of being able to put pen to the paper and really gaze at something and follow our attention that way made me realize how you need to make that more of a part of every day. And thank you so much to everyone who attended. And I just want to point, before I say goodbye, to our next webinar, which will be on Wednesday, March 20th at 3 p.m. And we're going to be with Deborah Haynes, who's Professor of Art and Art History at the University of Colorado in Boulder. She's going to present her research, which will be published in the journal Buddhist Christian Studies later this year. Her presentation will be titled The Blue Pearl, a research report on teaching mindfulness practices to college students. So registration will be up on our website, and we'll send an email announcement with more information soon. I hope you might be able to join us next month. Thanks again, Brad.
Let me just give my email contact.
Yeah, thank you.
Those who would like to email you. You can contact me at bcgrant@howard.edu. bcgrant@howard.edu.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing that. All right. Well, farewell, everyone, now until we meet again. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.